All right. I like to start with a quote. This one is from St. Thomas Aquinas, wonderful writer. The celestial bodies are the cause of all that takes place in the sublunar world.
Is that us?
Yeah.
What's sublunar?
Beneath the moon.
Beneath the moon, okay. I thought so, but...
Okay. In Hermetic Astrology, we use 7 specific steps in judging a chart. There's great value to this, and it's something I always want to bring into a room, especially in a room full of astrologers. And the way I look at it is that remaining orderly in one's analysis allows for clear and succinct interpretation. Quite often, if you get at a table with astrologers, it feels sort of like a free-for-all.
It is a free-for-all.
But when you actually go through systematic steps of looking at a chart, you really come up with a comprehensive picture. And before we actually start the 7 steps, there's a series of generalities that we look at when we just glance at a chart to start pulling out information about it. So tonight I'm seeing as being the forerunner to the next 5 classes that I teach. That's going to start up in 2 weeks. We have a week spring break. And we will go through these steps on another 5 occasions, meaning 6 times total if we include tonight's class. And what that should do is instill within the student the process for interpreting a chart to where it almost becomes habitual. And then I have another idea, which I'm thinking late August, I want to start up a 12-week class. And that's going to be a class on delineation with using the decanate. And this is going to be based on the work of one of our authors in Australia, Dennis Sutton, who has done a lot of research. He's taken the material from course 10 and basically provided contemporary charts. So we will no longer be looking at Winston Churchill and, come up with someone, Amelia Earhart, in order to determine
Ben Burney.
Yeah,
Everybody knows Ben Burney. I just did that one the other day.
We're going to look at people that are more in the contemporary news, a little bit more, and see what we can apply to that. And these are, again, the material will be all AA data as well, which is birth charts that are actually based on a accurately timed birth. So there's no rectification involved. And that's going to be kind of exciting because I really see the decanates as providing a spiritual interpretation to one's chart. It really gives you a lot of information about your spiritual path and your life path overall. All right, one of the generalities we look at in a chart, and I want to mention to everyone, you've seen this chart before just 2 weeks ago. This is just to start out with, we know who this is tonight. It's the chart of Mahatma Gandhi. In the end of your notes, dang, did I get it? Yeah. You should have the chart, astrodynes, and I actually gave you a aspect graph, which is as big as I could make it. So chances are you'll all be able to read that tonight. I wanted to use a chart that we had already started to work with, just based on the familiarity. We're somewhat accustomed to looking at this, and it will just help us in our process. So one of the first steps we look at when we view a chart, just at a glance, we want to look and see if there are retrograde planets. And retrograde planets are marked by an R after the minutes of the planet. Now, not to be confused with when you're reading progressions and you see an R, which doesn't mean retrograde, it means radical or natal. So,
But isn't it usually lowercase r?
it is a lowercase r. And in computer forms, the symbol for retrograde is just a uppercase r, though when you're hand writing the retrograde symbol, it actually is the R with an X over the lower front leg of the R. It looks like the symbol for prescription, or the old Rexall drugstores, if anyone can remember that.
Do you want to know who's on?
Sure, tell me who's on, Barb.
Okay, we've got Kay, we've got Doug, I'm Becker, I'm Becker.
I'm backward.
I'm Becker. Okay, I'll get it, sorry, Doug. We've got, somebody else, I thought. Anyway,
Well, hi, Kay and Doug. Welcome.
Kay and Renee and Doug.
Hi,
And
Renee.
Deborah from Massachusetts, she says, "This is great. It's the first time my computer is actually letting me view a lesson."
Well, we congratulate your computer.
Who's that? Deborah Yappy from
Oh, welcome, Deborah. I think Deborah's a hermetician, isn't she?
She's been
For
on
20
mailing
years?
list for a
Or...
long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, welcome. It's great to have everyone here. So, let's take a look. I see 3 retrograde planets. Does anyone see more?
No.
Excuse me.
Bless you. Oh, in case anyone needed to know, it's allergy season in New Mexico. We're all suffering from juniper and cedar allergies right about now. So if you see me rubbing my eyes, and if you hear Vicky sneezing,
You'll know what it is.
All right, what does repression mean? Any thoughts?
Hold back or to...
Well, to press is what?
Right.
To press is to push down on something. To repress might be to do it more than once.
It means I don't want to see this. I'm going to stay down.
We've all pressed our clothes, and if we repress our clothes, we've done it at least twice. So, yeah, to repress something is similar to suppressing something. It's to hold it back in some way. And so, repression is generally when one of our desires really seeks to find expression, but has trouble doing so. It feels in some way hindered from expression. So it's the same with the planets in your chart when they're retrograde. They still will have the same function or the same urges. Neptune is still going to be utopian and idealistic. Pluto is still going to move through universal welfare. And Jupiter will still express in benevolence and religious thinking. But they're being somewhat held back. Now, the good news in all of this is if you live long enough, there's a very good chance your planets will go direct in the course of your life. And when that happens, it's like getting a Christmas gift. At that time, you start to discover new qualities about yourself. And even without the planets going direct in the course of your life, you may find that these are innate personal traits, but that are just a little pushed down somehow. They're a little bit blockaded. That if you spend some amount of time, opening up the box, pulling them out, unwrapping them, looking at them, playing with them, you'll start to find their traits and be able to emphasize them a little bit more.
Do you think, just a question about his, do you think the fact that he's got 2 retrograde planets in an angle, do you think the fact that they're in an angle might give you more occasion for those qualities to come out?
I would think so. Yeah, again, anything in an angular house has a greater chance for expression than, let's say, in a cadent house. But when we look at the chart, we'll actually discover that even though these planets are repressed, this man actually expressed them in the course of his life. They did not go unexpressed,
Right.
but they may have been hindered in some way.
Right.
They may have been held back, just a little bit more. They may have been seat belted in rather than, allowed to free fall somehow. So we wouldn't say, if we looked at this man's life and history, we wouldn't say, well, oh, those never had any expression. But we might think, considering the amount of expression they had, that the actual potential that could have been there may even have been greater. So what retrograde planets are, I don't know if any of you have had the experience riding a train, or even you've been in your car parked at a stoplight, and then suddenly, your foot may slip a little bit on the brake and your car starts to move forward. But it appears from your eye that it's not you moving forward, but the car next to you is moving backwards against the background of the landscape. And that's what retrograde planets are. It's basically the Earth and the other planets are moving around the sun, and they're moving at different speeds. So what happens sometimes when the Earth starts to move faster than the other planets is it appears that they start moving backwards due to that movement of moving forward. So that's retrograde planets. All right. Some charts may have up to 5 retrograde planets in them. And I like to call them late bloomers. These are persons who really discover themselves later in life. There was a 71-year-old writer who used this term the other night on the Academy Awards show. That he had been described by one of his parents as being a late bloomer, and he said, and look at me, at 71, I got my story produced.
That's great.
I believe it was the writer for
The King's
Speech. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He had to wait for the Queen Mum
To pass.
to pass on.
Right. So, there you have them. All right. This is much harder to see, and they're actually, I don't think they're ever indicated on computer charts. But there are charts where you can have planets that are stationary. They can be either stationary retrograde or stationary direct. Basically, we call a planet stationary on the day when it is passing from one motion to the other. So here I've highlighted for you, we have Mercury on October 1869. We show Mercury retrograde on Friday the 8th. So that is a case of a planet going retrograde, stationary retrograde, the day that it goes retrograde. Now, if we were to follow this further down, Mercury is retrograde around 21 days at a time. It generally lasts about 3 weeks. This generally happens 3 times a year. So the day that it goes direct, it is stationary direct. And the symbols, when you do a handwritten chart, are either SR or SD. The word enduring, what does endurance mean?
Hanging in there.
Yeah, endurance is hanging in there. You run your race, you're at the last mile, and you keep going. So the traits of stationary planets are considered to be very enduring. That they are qualities in the personality that are like pit bulls with their jaws locked around your ankle.
Ouch.
Yeah, you can't shake them off. So these are really deep-seated traits that just don't easily go away.
And the only way that you would find that would be in the ephemeris,
Correct, because I have yet to see that show up on the horoscope program.
Mm-hmm.
So what you do, you pull out an ephemeris sheet for the day, month of birth, and you look to see. Is it a big deal? No. Does it give you information? Yes. So stationary planets do give us some information about the individual whose chart we're looking at. No stationary planets in the chart of Mahatma Gandhi. We can see, hold on, I don't think on my form I have the birth date written down, and I'm believing it's around October 1st, looking for the position of the sun. October 1st or 2nd would be my guess.
Was that ephemeris for the year, the October 1869, is that the year that Mahatma Gandhi was born?
I believe so, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
Well, let's look. One way to tell is we look at the chart. If I can find it in here.
So wouldn't it be the second, since it's 8 degrees 49?
Yeah.
Second or third,
So there.
between the second and third, yeah.
It is the second.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I was just looking here and guessing that it would be the first or the second, whereas I could have looked up here.
I just wanted to make sure I was looking at the right thing.
But let's look at the other things. The moon would have been in Leo, and we can see that the moon's in Leo.
At 19 degrees, so it would be somewhere, well, we know it was around, it was between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. sometime. that day.
Okay, so we can see already it's looking like the day of birth. This looks like the month and year of birth. We've got the sun in Libra, 8 degrees, the moon in Leo. We have Mercury at about 3 or 4 degrees of Scorpio. You can see here it's 342. Here on the chart it's 346. I'm thinking it's looking like this chart. We move on to Venus, 17 Scorpio 30. We look here, 1626.
Yeah, you were actually on the third instead of the second.
Ah,
Yeah.
oh, 1618. Got it. Thank you. Somebody's paying attention. Just testing. Mars, 1820. Yeah. So, we got the right month in here. And we can see
That's
that,
probably a midnight ephemeris.
I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And keep in mind that India also is east of Greenwich, with a very odd time zone, because it uses the hour and a half, I believe.
Yeah,
What?
yeah.
You know, most of us, for example, we live in Western time zone, which is seven hours.
Oh, plus from.
From Greenwich.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Okay.
So India might be 13.30, 13.5 hours east of Greenwich. So if we look across on the second, we see there's no stationary planet that day. Now again, when we're in subsequent classes, when we go to look at a chart, we're not going to be spending this kind of time on it. But I just wanted you to understand what the process is involved. We can pretty much look and see. Oh, what did I do?
You underlined it.
You underlined it.
Okay. Yeah.
Just to make sure we were all right.
There we are.
The consummate teacher.
All right. The next generality we look at when we're looking at a chart is we want to look and see how many planets fall above the horizon. The horizon moves from east to west, ascendant, descendant. Planets which fall in houses 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 tend towards publicity. So in one generality, when we look at the chart, we want to look and see, okay, how many planets are above the horizon? Somebody?
5.
Count.
5.
Yes, excellent. So that's half the chart. We can then judge that, certainly a good portion of this man's energy are spent in public venues. That this is somebody who in some ways stands out and tends towards being public. There they are. Now, when planets are below the horizon, which are houses 1 through 6, that tends to make the chart of somebody who is much more hidden. When this happens in your chart, it is actually harder for you to get attention for what you're doing. The things you do in life might go by unnoticed, unperceived. So, the person with the majority of their planets above the horizon really cannot afford to sneak around. Why?
They're going to get caught.
They're going to get caught.
Yeah, they'll get caught. And the person with the majority of their planets below the horizon struggles, because they can't get jailed for trying. So, what we could guess, if there were 5 planets above, how many are below?
5.
You are very good counters, class. So, 5 below, this indicates an equal division in this man between the desire for publicity and the desire to be able to do things, to fly below the radar, which is the lower portion of the chart. Welcome. Would you like some handouts? It might be hard for you to see the screen from that seat. Oh, and excuse me, everyone, but my allergies are kicking in.
Yeah. It's dry.
The roof of my mouth and the insides of my ears are itching.
Yes.
Kind of feel like a crazy person.
Start jumping up and down, and we'll agree with you.
Is that all it
How many
takes?
planets do you have up and down?
7?
So you gotta be careful.
No, 6. 7.
7. You have a few.
the next generality when we look at a chart is we want to look at how many planets are on the eastern horizon of the chart, which are houses basically 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, and 3. The individual whose chart is predominantly east-sided tends to mold their environment and circumstances. So one could say that that is somebody who is at cause in their life. They tend to make things happen around them. So let's look at this chart. What have we got?
6 on these.
The moon, the sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Saturn. So
He made himself.
he made himself, he made things happen. This is somebody who was very much at cause in his world. So I might have to get you to move a bit, Vega, because you're blocking the access to the... Yeah, now it
How's
can.
that?
Let's see. Yeah, that worked.
Got my seat.
Yeah, the radio waves could not, or infrared, whatever it is.
I am a Capricorn, I'm solid.
Like a good Icelandic woman.
Woman.
All right. Planets west in the chart. Houses 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It is said that if the predominance of the planets fall in the western hemisphere of the chart, the individual tends to be more molded by circumstances and the environment. Is one better than the other? No. All depends on how you use what you have. So the thing is, though, when everything is in the west side of your chart, you do feel slightly less in control of your life.
Right.
Except you have the control to the degree that you select your environment.
That you have to learn to manipulate your environment.
You do. And those in it. That is the skill. So when that happens in a chart, you tend to be more at effect of the world around you. Your life is spent in response to the outside forces that are impinging upon you. In this chart, we know there were 6 east. That means there are 4 west in the chart. And that's still pretty important. So we could determine from that although primarily he's somebody who was at cause in his world, he was also at the effect somewhat in terms of matters of perhaps work, companionship, and philosophies. Any questions so far? What we've covered are just the very big generalities that you can get at a glance when you look at a chart. These are the first steps. You know, what can I tell about this person? You look at the chart, you see, whoop, it's over here. This is somebody who is a motivating factor in their life. It's all up here. He'll get noticed for it.
Do you think, does this process help you paint a complete picture as you're going through a chart?
It does. But again, it's like building a house. You know, there's all different pieces involved. There's front steps, there's banisters, there are porch lights, there's mud rooms. You know, it's just part of the picture that you get. But it's layering. When we're interpreting a chart, we're layering. And the thing, again, that the trained astrologer can do, which a computer cannot do. 2 weeks ago, one of my clients sent me a printout that an astrologer had done on her brand new niece. And she was very impressed that she had received this 12-page printout. To which my response was, she said, though it seemed almost overwhelming, the amount of information. And I said, well, yes. And also, this is something that is just printed out by an astrology program. This astrologer did not sit down and write all of this for you. And the thing that one of those types of programs cannot do is it cannot weight the chart, nor can it synthesize the information. Yes, Barbara?
Phil asks, what happens when you are exactly equal, no matter how you slice it?
You're a well-rounded man.
Congratulations.
Yes, we salute you.
And when you asked if Deborah was a hermetician, she said, yes, she's been a hermetician since 1981.
That's what I thought, since the 80s. All right. Any other questions? Okay. So those steps that we just went through, retrograde planets, stationary planets, planets above the horizon, below the horizon, planets east, planets west, are the things you just synthesize as an astrologer when you sit down and you just glance at the chart for the first time. You take in all that information. Now we're actually starting our 7 steps. And the first of those steps is to note the power in the chart. And I will tell you that we actually have an advantage now, which we didn't necessarily have as astrologers in the past, which is the advantage of astrodynes. But still, even before we get to that, which can be one of the latter steps in judging a chart, it's good to hone your skills of what are some of the basic factors that might contribute to prominence in a chart. What is power? Volume of energy expressing through the chart. So power is important in those regards.
So this is the first step in judging, is that
Yes,
right?
first step. In fact, I've used the number 1 for all of you to indicate that. Step number 1. Note the power. Well, why on earth do you want to know the power?
Because that's how much energy they have to express their personality.
Yes. If you're moving into a new house and doing an inspection, one of the things they're going to look at is there circuitry enough to run your clothes dryer? Can you run an electric stove? Will the high volume appliances, will the air conditioner be able to run, or the spa you're putting into the backyard? You want to know, will you be able to run all of that equipment on that circuitry? So the power in a chart really lets us know, okay, how much energy is this person actually operating with? And what determines power in the most basic sense is the distribution of the planets among the houses. If you remember back a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, when we looked at houses, angular houses, 1, 4, 7, and 10 are powerful. So planets, when they're found there, and especially the luminaries when they are found in those houses, pack a wallop. They have energy. Succinct houses, which are 2, 5, 8, and 11, are moderate in strength. They are average. And then the cadent houses tend to be weak or feeble, which are 3, 6, 9, and 12. If you have your sun falling in a cadent house, one of the things I'll ask someone is, do they nap? Because it's advisable. Sun in a cadent house, you need to stop and recharge during the course of a day. because the vitality gets used up rather quickly. So let's apply what we just talked about to this chart. 6 out of 10 planets fall in angular houses. Just an aside, when we look at a chart, we do treat the Ascendant and Midheaven as planets, except in some of these steps, because the Midheaven and the Ascendant are always going to be the cusp of the 1st and 10th house. However, when we move forward and we'll look at these other steps, we're actually counting them as significators in what we're doing. So what can we say? There are 6 planets angular, houses 1, 4, 7, and 10. We see Mercury, Venus, Mars, Pluto, Jupiter, the Moon.
It seems to have
Above
energy
average power.
available, right, to do what he needs to do.
Available energy above average power. 1 planet in the succinct houses, being 2, 5, 8, and 11. That's Saturn. And 3 planets in cadent houses, being 3, 6, 9, and 12. So this is an above average chart, and when we actually judge what this man was able to accomplish in his lifetime, would say it was definitely above average work that he did.
Chris, I have a question. So when you're looking at, Mercury, Venus, Mars in the 1st house, and that's an angular house, so you know that that carries a lot of energy, but you see his sun is in the cadent house, wouldn't that kind of, like, he would want to do a lot of stuff, but he didn't quite have as much energy to do it as, or would not?
No, I think those are good questions, Vega, and I think one has to look at that. If you have a dynamic chart with a lot of planets in angular houses, but your sun is in a cadent house, there's a very good chance that you will spend great portions of your life trying to accomplish a lot and burning the candle at both ends, because you may not physically have the stamina that matches either your desires to accomplish or the opportunities that are presented to you.
Could it be affected at all by which cadent house it falls into? Because, in the 12th house, there's actually a lot going on. A lot under the surface. But
True, and one could have their sun in the 12th house, but have it in conjunction with their ascendant, which is actually a very empowering position. One could have, but if the sun is in the 6th house and opposing their ascendant, it's more debilitating.
Is this the chart of a bit of a control freak?
Yes, this is somebody who sought self-control.
That's
Who did?
commendable.
What's that?
That's commendable.
Yes. This is the chart of Mahatma Gandhi.
Oh, okay.
And so the desire for control for him was to control undesirable thoughts, feelings, and actions. And he wanted to slightly control the British government, which was functioning as a colonial power in his homeland.
That's where his Saturn comes in a bit.
Discipline. Yes, Vicki?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I have 5 planets in angles, and my sun in the 6th house, in a cadent house. So it's interesting what you were saying. And I don't think I have enough energy for all the things I want to do, but I still have a lot of energy, a lot of vitality.
so could you talk a little bit more about that? About if the sun was in the 6th and opposing the ascendant? How is that debilitating to it?
The aspect is an opposition, and what do oppositions do?
carry in two directions.
Yes, and the sun represents one's vitality, and the ascendant represents the physical body. So when that is the aspect, one tends to be at odds with themselves. So they're constantly going through tempest in a teapot. There's all of these little inner things that go on with that particular aspect, and that kind of ongoing drama or trauma can be debilitating to the health. Whereas if the sun is in the 12th house, but conjunct the ascendant, it certainly can make one very introspective and insightful. But that is a prominence compound with their vitality and their physical body. So they tend to be more energized by that rather than being in internal conflict with that. When the sun opposes the ascendant, it's different than a conjunction with the ascendant. When the sun conjuncts the ascendant, even if it's in the 12th house, you are noticed for what you do. If the sun opposes the ascendant, the conflict is one does not always get their just desserts, or one doesn't always get what may be the recognition that is desired. And that can create an ongoing frustration. Okay, we've looked at power. Now we want to look at the quality in the chart. Quality really determines the way in which you express your energy. And quality is determined by the distribution of planets among the signs of the zodiac. We have movable quality, which is Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. We call these signs the pioneers. If there is a predominance in your chart of movable or what's called cardinal signs, because these correspond to the cardinal points, the solstices and the equinoxes, then how is that individual's energy moving? Rapidly, intensely. Zane compared movable signs to matter in its gaseous state. If you think about it, in the gaseous state, the molecules are moving much faster than when they're in a solid state or in a liquid state. Fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, are the perfectors. So this is matter in its most solid state, especially when you get to Taurus. That is fixed earth. It's like a marble block. Mutable signs are the adapters. We think of them as the go-betweens. These are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. Curiously enough, with the exception of Virgo, all of those signs are pictured as being dual. Gemini, the twins, Pisces, twin fish, Sagittarius, half man, half horse. So they function as the go-betweens. The way I like to describe it is the movable signs are at the quarry. They are releasing the rock from the quarry, from the rock walls. The mutable signs may be the ones that drag that stuff into town, and the fixed signs are the ones that are carving and polishing it. The fixed signs want to put the polish on everything. So you'll find in temperament, if you have a lot of movable signs, you want to be in on the ground level of everything. You want to be the pioneer. You want to be the first with the idea, or in the initiatory discussion group. Do you want to sit around and work out all of the factors of how it's going to be implemented? Not in the least. The mutable sign, okay, give me your outline. I'll do some research and embellish upon it and move it to the next stage, and then I'll hand it over to the editor. So, let's note the quality in the chart.
It's fixed.
Now, once we start doing this, we also look at the position of the ascendant and midheaven, because the signs in which they fall are important. You think he's fixed? Isn't that what you do to a cat?
It happened to Dapper.
Oh, and a dog. All right, he's been fixed. 7 planets in fixed signs. Let's take a look.
He was determined.
This man was determined. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Scorpio. Pluto, Jupiter in Taurus. The moon in Leo.
Pretty fixed ideas there.
1 planet in a mutable sign. Oh, there you have it. Saturn in Sagittarius. That, of course, meant that there were 2. Well, actually, you know what I left out? And forgive me.
Immovable.
I left out the, also, what was left out is that the midheaven, the sun, and the ascendant are all in movable signs.
Well, Neptune is fixed.
Yes, and Neptune.
And I think there's only 6 planets in fixed.
Oh, there you have it. 3 planets, MC in the ascendant, 7 planets in fixed signs. I can't count. Strike the 7.
But 3 planets plus MC and AC is 5, and 7 makes 12. Isn't that what it is?
There is, but you can't forget Saturn here is in mutable. So there's 6 in. It needs to add up to 12, so only 6 planets. All right, the next thing we look at is triplicity. This is very important. I cannot stress how important triplicity is in interpreting a chart. The reason for this is the dominant elements in your chart really contribute to your temperament. Your temperament is going to impact you both in regards to the type of work that you're attracted to and the type of persons you get along with. So temperament has a great influence over us, and it's so important to look at temperament when you're comparing charts of one person to another. Fire, Aries, Leo, Sagittarius. Give me some fire traits.
Enthusiasm.
Inspiration.
Dynamic.
Dynamic, energetic, vital.
Business.
Yeah, these are all qualities that those signs will have in common. Earth tends to be practical. So this is Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn. Air, aspiration. Another term I use for the air signs is social. Gemini, Libra, Aquarius. They're all social signs. They like the exchange of ideas. They're mental signs, they're social signs. And the water signs are emotional. Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces. Intuitive, impressionable might be other terms that you can interchange with the qualities of water. So, let's see if I counted this up correctly. I insert these little blinds in the presentations to see if anyone's awake and can actually catch them. All right, 3 planets, the midheaven and the ascendant in movable signs. Let's take a look.
Midheaven?
Huh. Why am I doing that? We're supposed to...
We're on, we're on,
Did I go backwards?
I think you went backwards.
I think you did.
Oops. I was obviously sleeping during
Okay, well,
the preparation of this slide. I'm glad you all caught it.
yeah. So,
Okay.
So let's look at, we'll look at what?
Fire. Let's start with fire. 1, Saturn in Sagittarius. Neptune in Aries. The moon in Leo. 3 planets in fire. What are they forming? Grand Trine. What comes after fire? Earth. Pluto, Jupiter in Taurus, and that's it. Water or air. Sun in Libra, ascendant in Libra. Water. We have Uranus in Cancer, the midheaven in Cancer, Mercury, Venus, Mars in Scorpio. I'm seeing a lot of water.
He's an emotional guy.
So this is somebody who's very emotional, moves from great feeling. Now the thing about emotions, they run full spectrum. Emotions can be the most exalted sensitivity to other life forms. It could be passion and jealousy, hurt feelings. So emotions, you know, they can be all over the board.
Flaming Mars rage
Yeah.
is another.
All right. Importance. The thing to look at in a chart is, where are you placing your emphasis in life? You know, what themes are most important to you? We have societies. The personal houses, 12, 1, 2, and 3. Well, what does the word personal imply? It's all you, baby.
Me, myself, and I.
Yes, me, myself, and I, and me again. 12th house. Your subconscious, your secrets, your inner life. 1st house. Your body, your personality, your expression. 2nd house, your assets, your wealth, your values. 3rd house, your private thoughts. What would you determine about a chart if the predominance of planets was in personal houses?
If the person was preoccupied with their personal concerns.
Otherwise known as self-absorbed. What comes next? Companionship houses. 4, 5, 6, and 7. We have companions in the home, companions in love or our children, companions in the workplace, companions in public or our mates. If the predominance of your planets falls in houses of companionships, what is your preoccupation?
Your relationships with others.
Yes, and I don't, you know, they're self-absorbed. I'm not sure what to call absorbed in others, other absorbed.
That would be us people watchers, etc.
And it's not just watching with the companionship houses. It's interactive. It's not detached observers, but it's more participants in the game. And then the public houses, 8, 9, 10, and 11. 8th house, your credit, your debts. The 9th house, your publicly expressed opinions, your philosophies. 10th house, your honor, your reputation. And the 11th house, your public associates. Those people, your acquaintances that you interact with in a public realm. If the majority of your planets is in those houses, well, you tend towards being very visible.
Then you're absorbed by
Others.
being on the stage, so to speak.
In a sense.
Being seen,
Being seen,
Being
being
seen.
visible, being
recognized.
recognized. That's good. Those are all good terms. Let's apply it. Did I miss something? I believe so. Okay. Well, looking at the chart which we have, let's apply that. If we look at the personal houses, 12, 1, 2, and 3, we can see there are 5 planets. Half of the planets fall there. Companionship houses, 3, and then the public houses, 2. Yet, this was very much a public figure. What happened? Does something else explain this in a chart?
He has this moon in the 10th house in Leo for one thing. That probably
Stands out.
yeah.
But one might determine from the chart
That's Pluto conjunct Jupiter in the 7th.
that being public may not have been his personal goal.
I would think not.
Yeah. That it was a byproduct of time and place and doing what he did.
Right.
The personal goal, judging from this chart, would probably have been inner work.
Right. But a good thing he had those 2 planets up in the 10th house, or the moon in the 10th house and
Uranus at the midheaven.
yeah, conjuncting the midheaven, because he needed to have attention for what his work was.
Yeah. Yeah, the work he may not have chosen for himself, but certainly got absorbed by that wave of history.
And his unique interpretation of it.
Yeah, the Uranus, completely unique interpretation. Yeah, I mean, truly, it was not since probably the time of Ashoka that the concept of a non-violent political unit. And that was certainly after Ashoka had conquered much of India and demolished his enemies.
Well, it's interesting too that the Uranus is in Cancer. So it was his domestic world that he was he was interested in turning upside down.
Well, and domestic, when we refer to our country,
Right.
we refer to it as our homeland.
Right.
Or, if we're taking a flight within the country, what do we call it? Domestic flight. So I think that also it can extend outward from not just the home, but to the homeland.
Right.
All right. So far, we've done good. Now, the next steps which I'm going to give you, which are, I believe, 5, 6, and 7, I always combine when I'm looking at a chart. What I do next, once I've done these great generalities, I then start moving around the chart from the 1st house to the 12th house, and I incorporate all of these next steps. As you go through each house, note the nature of the planetary energy transmitted through each house. What does that mean? Can anyone help me?
Well, their houses are going to be different in the kind of energy that they express.
All right, and here's one general rule of thumb. 12 houses, 10 planets. So in even the most widespread chart, you will have 2 empty houses. I've seen charts which are unusual, but they might have 5 or 6 planets in one house. So what we're doing is we're noting the nature of the planetary energy transmitted through each house. What planet is actually in that house? When we do that, we look at the planet in the house. We also look at the sign in which it falls. Why do we do that? The flavor or the color, the adjectives, the adverbs. It gives a greater description to the story of interpretation. All right. Step number 5. Note the chief ruler of the house. This is pretty simple. If you have more than one planet in the house, the planet closest to the cusp is the chief ruler. The other planet or planets in the chart are the co-rulers.
What if by Astrodyne, one of the co-rulers, by that definition, has more power?
Then you pay attention to it.
Okay.
Because the truth is, these are rules that were in place before we had Astrodynes. And what we discussed last week is actually the most powerful planet in that house is going to be getting the most attention. And the most powerful planet in the chart, you will find that almost all of the other urges in the chart bow themselves to express through that particular urge. All right, each house cusp has a sign on it. This is particularly informative to us when there's no planet in the house. We look to the sign on the cusp and we determine what planet or planets govern that sign. And that gives us information about that house. What this will mean, though, is that they are falling somewhere else in the chart. So what we do is we look to where that planet falls in the chart. And we'll get to that shortly. Yes, Barbara?
Okay, yes. I thought the chief ruler was the planet ruling the sign on the cusp.
That is a co-ruler. Now, sometimes we get intercepted houses. This has a lot to do with charts as you start to move away from the equator into northerly and southerly latitudes. And then there's a tendency for there to be more intercepted signs. Intercepted signs represent latent qualities, and they tend to be the weakest signs in a chart unless by chance there are a lot of planets in those signs. If you have a sign that touches no house cusp and has no planet in it, if you look at your Astrodyne report, it'll be at the very bottom of the list. These become the signs that are having the least amount of expression. So, Sun falls in a house, we know it's subject to vigor. The Moon, fluctuation. Mercury, thought. Venus, gratuities. Mars, strife. Jupiter, abundance. Saturn, poverty. Uranus, eccentricity. Neptune, illusion. Pluto, coercion. These are all things you learned in the 3rd class, and hopefully these keywords are drummed in because we will use them as we go around the chart. Now, here is the step I was starting to express, which is the other thing you have to do is note the house that is actually occupied by the planet or planets ruling the sign of that house. This becomes especially important when it is an unoccupied house. We say that where this planet falls, that house exercises authority over the other house. And we will get around to looking at what that actually means. It's easier to understand in practice. So, if the planet that governs one house is actually found in the first house, we're going to say that the matters of that house are subservient to your personal inclination. Second house, money matters. Third house, education. Fourth house, home, family, influences it. Fifth house, children, speculation, creativity. Sixth house, work, employer's illness. Partners and the public, if that planet falls in the seventh house. Legacies and partners' money, if it's in the eighth house. Philosophy, foreign events, if it falls in the ninth house. Business, honor, reputation in the 10th. Groups, clubs, and friends, if it falls in your 11th house. And secrets and psychic matters, if it falls in your 12th house. As we go through Gandhi's chart, we'll put this into action, and you'll actually see how we use it in interpretation. So, I combine these two steps, step number 5 and step number 6. Let's read a chart. Let's talk about the first house. This is where we start. The ascendant falls in the sign of Libra. Give me some key words about personality and self-expression. Sociability, affability. Peace, harmony, equilibrium, balance is the key word. So this is a personality that is seeking harmony and balance. What planet rules Libra?
Venus.
Venus. That becomes part of our equation. Venus likes beauty, art, sensuality. And Venus falls in the first house in Scorpio. Mercury is the planet closest to the cusp of this house.
Which of those 3 planets is the most powerful?
Mars.
Mars.
Yeah.
But since Mercury is closest to the cusp, it would be considered the ruler of that house.
We'll call it the chief ruler.
Chief ruler.
Yeah. Well, we'll say this is the guy that took out the leasehold agreement.
Yeah.
The others are roommates. So,
And certainly he was a communicator.
okay, in terms of personal expression, communication is one facet of Mercury. What's another facet?
Intelligence.
Intelligence, thought, discernment, discrimination, observation, perceptions. These are all qualities of Mercury. So this is a very intelligent, perceptive. It's in the sign of Scorpio.
Would that muddle Mercury a little bit?
I actually believe Mercury is at its
Excuse me.
its harmony in Scorpio. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I had
I can go get it.
well, in course 8 right there should be a table of essential dignities, second shelf down,
Thank you.
and somewhat towards the left. Yeah. This is always so helpful when you do this part, is to have your table of essential dignities. This stuff goes back 2,500 years.
Don't wait on me.
Oh, okay.
How can There it is, right there.
Now, on the contrary, Venus doesn't do so well in Scorpio. What happens when Mercury is in Scorpio? Think of it, retentive mind. This is somebody who remembers the details and the facts and can have almost a photographic memory.
And digs deep and gets to the bottom of it.
Yes, they're like a sleuth or a detective.
And remembers everything, every detail.
What about Venus in Scorpio, though?
Oh, can't
Jealous
say
and
no.
possessive.
And a little bit like a dog in heat.
Yeah.
Yeah, Venus in Scorpio tends to be very passionate.
That's a nice way of putting
Yeah,
it.
well, one could say downright slutty.
Yeah.
So.
Especially next to Mars.
Yes, and then you have this combination. Venus is next to Mars. So, no table of essential dignities?
Not in that book.
Oh, boy.
Is it in delineate,
It's in horrible order.
here, it's in this book.
Course 8.
So we want to know
Mercury, I believe, is at its harmony in Scorpio, and I think Venus
you're right.
is...
No, it is.
Venus is at her fall in Scorpio. Or no, Venus is at her detriment in Scorpio.
Venus detriment Scorpio. So what about Scorpio would make Mercury express in its harmoniously? Because I think of it being passionate and intense
And I think of Mercury in Scorpio as being retentive, insightful, doggedly determined, avid researcher, going down a trail of clues and determined to find the answers.
Yeah, solving mysteries.
Yeah.
Okay, so not muddled by passion.
Barbara,
Renee says Mercury analyzes also.
Mercury analyzes.
Right, but yeah, it's interesting. Because
Mars is at home in Scorpio. Perfect place for passion.
Passion, yes. But it's also, I mean, Scorpio is desire energy, so, you know, with all that mindfulness at the top, you could control the Venus, Mars, which he did.
Or at least attempted to most of his life.
Yeah.
I mean, his life was all about sublimating passions in order to do good works in the world. But it was a constant, ongoing thing. It's not like he was born desire-free.
It seems. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, sorry.
It seems with his Mercury in Scorpio there, he was able to communicate and explore, investigate and communicate high spiritual values.
Definitely. And being the chief ruler of that house, people remember Gandhi more for his writings, for his quotable quotes, for his communication to the masses, than they might remember his affairs and or the incredible dietary restrictions and experiments that he went through in the course of his life.
And the beatings.
And the what?
Beatings that he endured.
Yeah.
That Mars must have.
Yes, definitely his fair share of beatings. Courtesy of authority figures.
Well, that's really close, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's one of the closest aspects in this chart. Let's keep moving, because time is essential. Scorpio governs the cusp of the second house. What two planets govern Scorpio? Mars and Pluto. Saturn, however, falls in the house, so we say Saturn's the chief ruler. in the sign of Sagittarius. I believe there's no essential dignity there. So that sign does not condition Saturn in any way, but somebody give me a good Saturn in Sagittarius sentence.
Well, he probably had strict, conservative, philosophical views toward men.
Excellent. Very good sentence, Vicky. Yes. Yes. One might say, making it even more concise with Saturn in Sagittarius and the second house, ethical values. If we were going to distill it down to 2 words, that could be it. But what else affected money in his life? Saturn, he clearly took a vow of poverty. Because he learned early on that if you start doing community work and then taking money from people for that, whoever gives you the greatest gift actually owns you. Something valuable for all of us to remember in life. Whoever gives you the biggest gift has the biggest claw on you. So, Scorpio, Mars is in the first house. This is somebody who can capitalize on personality, appearance. I mean, people probably wanted to send money because the more poor man had nothing but a dhoti and a shawl and sandals. Money may also have come in through partners. This could be either a dowry through marriage or through other types of business alliances. I believe early on in his career, he was in as a barrister in a partnership in a law office. I could be wrong, but I think that was part of it. But the public can also be engaged in money. So this is what we do when we look at the rulers of the house cusp and where they fall in the chart. Because these become stories of interaction in the chart. Third house, nobody's home. This house is unoccupied. Sagittarius on the cusp. Jupiter becomes the ruler. But let's just talk about Sagittarius ruling the third house. Or Jupiter ruling the third house. What kind of early education?
Religious.
Possibly parochial or religious education, and or better schools. With Jupiter governing the third house, there could be an emphasis placed either by family or the community on a good education, and there could be enough ease and able to get grades and move. What about Sagittarius as a foreign education? He learned a foreign language as a child.
That's a good question.
He did. He learned to speak English.
Well, that was advantageous, though,
If you were fighting the empire.
And an abundance of early education, too, because of the nature of its ruler.
What else? He did, although this was higher education, he did go to school in England. Yes.
And lawfulness would be a basis of thought for him.
Sagittarius, to some degree, rules law, and his studies abroad were in the subject of law. But now, what would he think about? What's on his mind?
Religion and law.
And or the other people in his life. His companions are constantly going to be, when the ruler of your third house falls in the seventh, you're thinking about your relationships all the time. Well, how does that work for somebody who's self-absorbed? It's kind of a detour.
Or balance.
Or balance. It helps to take the consciousness outside of oneself, where it would normally be engaged, and place it outside the self on others. So, very helpful in this chart. All right, 4th house, home, family, property, real estate, land, father. Capricorn is on the cusp. It is unoccupied. Saturn falls in the 2nd house. Give me some keywords for a Saturn or Capricorn ruled home.
Strict and
Thank you.
ambitious.
Strict disciplinarian father might be 3 words you could put together. Conservative family life.
Was his father ambitious? I don't happen to know. But
His father was a grocer and a businessman, so he obviously made enough money that he could send his son abroad to study law. And one might think that financial values were learned from family. And or there may have been support from the father or father's family, or money could have been made through property, real estate, land, etc. Fifth house, love, romance, creativity, children. We have Aquarius on the cusp of the 5th house. Well, as conservative as his upbringing may have been, what about his attitudes towards child rearing and domestic psychology?
Probably more progressive.
Probably more progressive or downright eccentric. But consider, India is not a culture that we might consider externally progressive. I mean, if you look at the Western world, fashion changes here every year. What about in India? Right.
virtually never.
No, it's the same styles that have been worn for, 4,000 years probably. So it is a more traditional culture or society. Now, granted, certain things have been incorporated over the millennium, aniline dyes and other things into fashion, but primarily the styles of buildings, architecture, homes, etc. has, I hate to use the word static, but has remained traditional. So one would imagine that within a traditional culture, he had some unusual approaches towards child rearing. I believe he had only 2 children, 2 daughters. But where are the rulers? Saturn in the 2nd house, Uranus in the 9th. So his children may have been subjected to both his restrictive poverty standards. We're talking no fancy clothes here. Homespun for everyone. And his philosophies, progressive philosophies. He may have made an emphasis for his children in terms of education or having to have a spiritual life or a public life.
Excuse me, Christopher, wasn't he living in a community when he had his children, so that would be the eccentricity of the 5th house, sort of different than the norm in India at that time?
Yeah,
No?
I would say so. Because generally the persons who lived in communities would be monks or nuns
Right.
rather than householders. But here was a householder living in an extended community. So that would be unusual. 6th house, Pisces on the cusp, the 2 rulers, Neptune and Jupiter. Neptune falls in the 6th house in Aries. How would Neptune describe work or the workplace?
Idealistic.
Idealistic, utopian, visionary, all great adjectives,
It's repressed.
but somewhat repressed.
A pioneer
Yeah.
within Aries.
How does one accomplish all they want to do in their vision if they've taken a vow to restrict material assets? Because what? Great visions usually involve a building plan of some kind, resources. So the repression here might possibly be due to other factors in the chart. But I mean, what could be more idealistic than cottage industry? That every person could actually be employed if people made things by hand.
But cottage industry, I mean, if it's in, it's usually not big bucks. Right.
No, it's not. That fits in. Nobody's getting wealthy generally on cottage industry, but everyone has a right livelihood. Everyone is gainfully employed. Hands are busy. One gains self-esteem from doing their very best work and, producing something of quality.
Right. And part of what makes that idealistic is that most of us are a little more materialistic than that. So it makes it a very difficult world to live.
Right. And again, living here in this culture, we have such a different vision of the world than anywhere else. And in that particular decade in India, again, this is a culture that had done the same things for thousands of years. Fields were still being plowed by water buffalo, and things could be made by hand. In fact, it is still to this day. India, China, and Mexico are considered to be the handcraft capitals of the world. The greatest amount of folk art is produced in those cultures. Oops. Let's keep moving. 7th house, marriage, partnership. Oh, go back to work. The co-ruler falls in the 7th house, Jupiter. Working with a partner or wanting to share your job with your spouse. Marriage, partnership, Pluto ruler, Jupiter co-ruler, Aries on the cusp, Mars becomes the co-ruler. And look at that, co-ruler of the 7th house in opposition with the rulers of the 7th house. What's going on here? I'll bet there were a few good discussions in that
There
home.
were, yeah. There were. And probably a little coercion. Pluto tends to express to a house as coercion, right? Or cooperation.
Or cooperation. And I think there was both.
Both, right,
He originally coerced her to do his will,
right.
and eventually she was won over by cooperation, and he actually learned from her example.
Right.
But Jupiter there also means that there would be faith held in common in a marriage, that one's devotional instincts could be shared, and therefore the advantage of the Pluto-Jupiter conjunction is it can give common tools to be used, even though Mars also rules this house, and Mars always brings strife. Again, Aries is on the cusp. There's the ability to resolve that eventually through having a shared philosophy, a shared religion, or a shared cooperative community goal, which Pluto represents.
And the fact that they're in an earth sign, Taurus, would you suppose that was around their relationship about their personal resources, being Taurus? Or, I mean, what would that
Some of their original strife was over that. But I always look at a fixed sign as being a lasting relationship
Yeah.
that creates stability. But going back to your theme of coercion, keep in mind this was an arranged marriage. I think he was 12 or 13 when he was married. And it was their parents of both parties basically made their family alliances that, we're joining our families and our resources through these two individual members of our family. Basically the way it was done around the world, up until about the last 300 years, when the concept of, marrying for love came into Western culture. That really has never been the case in history.
And we may be discovering that there really is no such thing as love.
Well, or that it doesn't necessarily work any better than an arranged marriage.
I'd like to see the stats on that.
Before you jump in?
If somebody wanted to arrange something, I'd give it due consideration.
Okay. 8th house, other people's resources, spirit world. Taurus is on the cusp, house is unoccupied, Venus becomes the ruler, falls in the 1st house.
Gratuities.
Gratuities.
Other people.
When you do public works or spiritual works, you have to be supported. Because it cannot be done without resources. Even if you're living on rice and beans, you need that sack of rice and that sack of beans. So I would say that his personality or charisma could have actually charmed the resources from others. Not that there's any indication that he ever misused this. He may have received gratuities, but was not necessarily gratuitous.
Well, he wasn't seeking them, I wouldn't think. Would you?
No, probably wasn't, except, much like a minister of a church, when he saw that they needed pews or another cow to milk, may have had to ask around.
Artful dreams and female spirit guides.
Female spirit guides, okay. Venus. Ninth house, Uranus in Cancer, Gemini on the cusp, Mercury the co-ruler in the 1st house. Got 20 more minutes, guys. We'll wrap this up. We might even end early.
Well, very individualistic in his philosophy.
Okay, unique, unconventional, individualistic philosophies. Somebody who might want to change the institutions in which he learned and functioned. This could be a rebel against both Orthodox religion or Orthodox education, the courts. We discovered last week, or the week before, that this was the most harmonious area of the chart, so that this was where he could do his greatest work. It's also foreign countries, and his life was changed in foreign countries. To some degree, seeing the type of freedom he had living as an Indian in London, that being taken away as an Indian and a person of color in South Africa, and then being in his own homeland where the English treated the nationals as being completely subservient. So his philosophies were formed by his world travel. And Uranus strives towards equality. It's the planet of revolutions, liberty, equality. Mercury in the 1st house, able to speak publicly, and express his ideas. A teacher. 10th house, career, honor, reputation. Cancer on the cusp. Moon in Leo in the 10th house. The moon is his most dominant planet. The planets in your 10th house do not necessarily denote the type of work you will do, but the way in which you will do it.
Passive resistance, I was just thinking.
Excellent.
And you said it more or less.
It's how you do it. And the moon can express as passivity. And his approach was passive resistance. It was nonviolent resistance.
That backdoor to leadership is what I was thinking. Leo, modified Leo, severely modified Leo.
Good delineation, Wellington. Okay. But the moon, a luminary in the 10th house, also makes one very visible. In this case, he may not have been setting out towards this, but what household could you go into and use the word Gandhi and not conjure up a bespectacled, bald-headed man, in a shawl and diaper with a staff and maybe a little begging bowl? I mean, everyone will know who he is. It's like saying Einstein, These are household names. We know who they are, what they mean. So the moon up there at the top of the chart brings public visibility. And the moon is to the common people. Household name. All right. Leo, on the cusp of the 11th house, unoccupied. The ruler falls in the 12th house. Ooh. What about friends?
Maybe he met lots of friends in jail.
Yeah, all sorts of problems. Friendship would be sorts of
Right.
problems.
Or maybe friends were instrumental in sending him to jail. But with a sun-ruled 11th house, you will know powerful people. You will count among your friends, the rich and famous. But this is also somebody who may have suffered 12th house at the hands of his friends. Disappointments. Yeah, there are people he thought were political allies who betrayed him. Jenna being one of them.
Oh, that's right.
So, and I'm sure we don't know the others, because my guess is that isn't what he ever discussed or wrote about.
Right.
Why? It would have been a private matter.
That his Mercury in Scorpio would remember forever.
But never speak of.
And never
But
think
his
of.
sun in Libra would seek to find harmony about
To
it.
forgive, but not to forget.
But never.
But to forgive, but never forget.
If he didn't have Saturn in Sagittarius, he might well have spoken about those friends.
And the 12th house. Sun is the ruler in Libra. Virgo on the cusp. Mercury in the first house. Sun in the 12th house.
Well, he
In
had a
jail.
vital life of incarceration.
Yes.
Yeah, he may have, you know what? It could have been a forced vacation. I think I'll just sit here and spin for a few weeks and not be responsible for everyone's needs in the nation.
May have been kind of nice. Giving him a chance to meditate.
Though, I also think of this from the perspective, think of Virgo as being diet, nutrition. This man fasted to the death, nearly, a couple of times. Self-mortification is also the 12th house.
That's interesting.
Expunging the sins of the nation through self-mortification.
Well, and he, with the sun there, it is like, what, since it's a natural ruler of Pisces, he was sort of a martyr to his cause.
Yes, he was martyred. He was shot
Yeah.
by an opposition.
Right. Is that how
And
he
his
got-
last words,
He got shot?
he was assassinated.
Yeah, he blessed his assassin, didn't
Yes,
he?
Jai Ram, or Hail God. So,
Wow, I didn't know that.
in 1949,
I
he was,
didn't know that.
I believe he was shot
Yeah, he was in a crowd.
in a crowd, much
Going
like
to prayers or going to
Benazir
prayers.
Bhutto was recently.
Yeah.
Okay. This last step we actually do with astrodynes. This is the process of look at the prominence of each planet and number of aspects received by it. Note the most powerful planet, sign, and house, the most harmonious planet, sign, and house, and the most discordant planet, sign, and house. We've got 15 minutes left, and we have the astrodynes at the bottom of the page. Generally speaking, we could determine that luminaries and angular houses give strength, but also number of planets in a house would give strength. So here, angular houses being 1, 4, 7, and 10, we might immediately think, oh, these are going to be strong houses. They're strongly aspected, and there's planets there. So if we look at the astrodyne report, the first house is most powerful, 26.8% of the power. 10th house, second in strength, 20% of the power. 7th house, third, 17.2%. So just from power alone, knowing that the 1st, 10th, and 7th are strongest, what are his areas of importance? Self, career or prominence, and others. Partnerships.
It's public.
These are the things that motivated this man. Most harmonious planet, sign, and house. Look in the I can't even speak, column under harmony, also known as the Carmony, for the largest positive number.
Uranus,
Uranus,
the planet.
9th house, and I'll bet Cancer, where Uranus falls, is,
No, it's discordant.
okay, everything is except Pisces and Aquarius. There are only 2 harmonious signs in this chart. Which brings me to the conclusion. It ain't what you got, it's how you use it. Here is the case of an extremely discordant chart of somebody who really alchemized themselves and put all of their time and attention to doing that work constantly. So, harmonious planet, Uranus. The good things in his life would come through his individualism, through his originality, through his willingness to break with traditional forms. The most powerful, the most harmonious sign, Pisces. Empathy, sympathy, sensitivity. The most harmonious house, the 9th house, religion, philosophy, the higher mind, teaching, travel, foreign countries. How did he really win? He enlisted the aid of the newsreel, Uranus. Motion picture at that time. Technology. Pathé came into place, and they were filming these demonstrations and events. People around the world got to see, in the comfort of their own movie theater, how brutal the British overlords were. Until they after World War II, where the U.S. had fought to throw off fascistic rule, both Japanese and German, it became really clear that our closest allies were the same brutes that we had been fighting against. So his harmony was the ability to use that medium, that cutting edge technology of the newsreel to embarrass a nation.
Right, and it being up there conjunct his MC, he had direct access to making it public.
Yeah.
Yeah. People wanted to know about it.
Mercury co-ruled his ninth.
Yes, Gemini on the
So
cusp.
he was able to communicate that with
With pictures.
pictures.
One didn't need to say a word. You know, when you see soldiers there with sticks clubbing you, unarmed individuals
Yeah.
living in their own country.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the greatest discord in this chart. We certainly know it's Scorpio. It's the first house.
Yep.
And it's Mars. As Wellington pointed out earlier, man got his fair share of beatings.
Did he have a temper?
I imagine he really did have a temper.
Probably in the early days.
He decided he could not, unless he could remove that from within himself, he could not expect the others in the world to not be brutes. You know, and from that came that quotable quote, you know, we must become the change we want to see in the world. Yes, Barb.
Renee asked a question back when you were in Scorpio. She wanted to know, do you think that Venus in Scorpio expresses the potential promiscuous sexuality equally in male or female, a male or female chart? Like, is it stronger when in a female chart?
I don't know. I've never looked at a chart from that perspective. I think she's an equal opportunity employer, personally. The only difference is, Renee, we have a culture, as are most cultures, that are biased towards seeing virtue in women, and a different behavior when it's expressed by men is considered to be very masculine, but in women it's considered unvirtuous. So I think cultures have a double standard towards women, so the inclination is to see that differently when it's expressed by either male or females. You know, when it's expressed through a man, it's considered sexual prowess. So a woman, it's considered slutty. All right. Aspects. We did this 2 weeks ago. We have 5 minutes. Let's quickly recap here. Who can find the most powerful aspects?
The moon, Mercury? Is that 13?
So is it a parallel,
Moon, Mercury parallel.
that 13 something?
That is the strongest aspect, followed by the Midheaven Saturn parallel at 11.80. So intensity compound involving the moon, domestic urges, and Mercury, intellectual urges. In this case, I look at it as subliminal thinking and rational thinking in an intensity compound. This is somebody who could use the best of both sides of their brain and combine them into something of greater power than the individual parts. Let's look for the most discordant aspect, I think, is the Moon-Mars square. No, it's the opposition from Mars to Pluto at a minus 14.35. So, give me a delineation for Mars-Pluto opposition. He took a lot of beatings.
Yeah.
Pluto being the coercive force, the public, the seventh house, the force of those in the community that wanted him to just fit in, blend in.
He just wasn't going to do it, was he? That's amazing that he was standing that he had to do.
Uh-huh. Take a licking and keep on ticking.
That's why I was asking about the 12th house sun with all that stuff in the first house. Because, we say that the Canaan house is the most feeble as far as the energy of the sun, I was just trying to figure that out, how would you express that in earthly energy?
You have to have downtime.
That was the nap in the afternoon.
You have to have downtime.
I got that.
With a cadent sun. Because you can only be on so much, but it means that you're pouring out from a limited supply. Let's find the most harmonious aspect in the bunch. I think Jupiter sextile Uranus. Could that be it? No. Moon trine Neptune.
No.
1047 so far is the highest.
Yeah, the Moon trine Neptune appears to be the most harmonious. So let's do a delineation for that. Moon, feelings. Neptune,
Vision.
vision.
Spirituality.
He was able to create a vision for the common person.
And there was a degree of empathy or compassion or sensitivity that connected him to the common person. Yeah. This you already know from 2 weeks ago. All right, my homework for you, no class for 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, we'll start the next delineation class, and what we will be doing in those classes is what we did tonight. We're going to go around the wheel of the chart. We're going to start with our generalities. What can we tell about this chart? Then we're going to go around the wheel, looking at each chart and doing a delineation. Because we won't be going through the long explanation of what each of the steps are that we did in the beginning of tonight's class, we're going to have that time to apply it to looking at the aspects in a chart and coming up with individual delineations for aspects between planets. So that's how the next 5 classes will be run. And hopefully through this repetitive structure for another 5 weeks, looking at a variety of charts, that you will really get good at this, that you'll start to feel like masters at chart interpretation.